Ah, Scream 3, you silly little devil you. Although it may be the black sheep of the Scream family, there is still a lot to love about this threequel. It's easily the silliest Scream movie without a doubt. It's absolutely absurd and has a crazy twist that ties back to the original. But recently, viewer Anon shared with me the assembly cut of Scream 3. Thank you so much, viewer Anon. I appreciate you, whoever you are. And my god, is it completely different. Basically, all it is an early cut of the film from late 1999 before the film's release in the year 2000. It features a variety of differences and is way longer than the cut we all know and love, coming out at 2 hours and 22 minutes. In today's video, I want to go over all of the differences, talking about some things that should have been left in and some things that I'm happy were changed. Let's get into it.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Before we get into this video, let's first hear a quick word from our sponsor. 3 Minutes is an indie TTRPG, or tabletop role-playing game, inspired by Ultraman and Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. In the game, you can play as a host who bonds with the gigantic guardian fighter that you get to create. With these characters, you can navigate grandiose locations and hunt down kaiju-sized creatures called EGs that are running rampant. The narrator, similar to a dungeon master, plays not only the EG but manages the sites and any other NPCs. The game uses an adapted version of Go Fish as its core resolution mechanic to give the game a unique feel. Players draw cards from a central pile and use any pairs or face cards that they gain to resolve any challenges that come their way. It's like Godzilla, Go Fish, and D&D had an epic baby. Supporting this project on Kickstarter will make this bodacious game possible. Depending on what tier you select, you could receive a digital version or a code to order a physical copy of 3 Minutes, Pogs, and other Cave of Monsters games. You could even develop your own EG monster for the game by supporting the Shining Badge tier. Nice! Click on the link in the description to support 3 Minutes on Kickstarter. And don't forget to tell them that KillJoy Jake sent you. So just to clarify, I'm not going to break down every single scene in the Scream 3 assembly cut. I mean, some things are literally beat for beat exactly the same as what we know. There's really no point in me going beat by beat through the story. I mean, if you've seen Scream 3, this is pretty much the same story. There are some things that are just done differently, sometimes better, sometimes worse. So let's start with the opening scene. This is the one scene from this movie that feels completely new. It's almost an entirely new scene now because of the way that they frame it. So let's break it down. It starts almost exactly the same. We see Cotton Weary on the freeway, chilling out, vibing, stuck in LA traffic. I hear that shit's miserable. Cotton gets a call from a sexy voice on the other side of the line, and it might be some lady who's trying to have phone sex with him, as Cotton literally says to her at one point in this sequence. In actual Scream 3, this is only a small portion of the conversation on the phone. Like, most of it is the Ghostface talk, but that's not necessarily the case here in the assembly cut. It is mostly just the girl voice talking through the phone, but it is, of course, Ghostface. Although we get robbed of a killer Roger L. Jackson performance, I kind of like this a little better considering what this movie was going for. It's trying to hype up this voice changer thing to make our Ghostface in Scream 3 just a little scarier. Impossible technology, at least for the time, is definitely a big positive for your killer, and this opening scene was crucial to sell me on it. The Scream 3 we all know, I just don't feel like that opening scene really sells me on it. I wish it was just the Roger L. Jackson voice. But this assembly cut makes the voice changer pretty damn cool because of the way it shows it off. I think what I love about it is that at no point do you really know that there's a voice changer involved. You just think it's a woman's voice. Like, if you had never seen Scream 3 before and this was your introduction to it, this would be really scary. As the phone conversation turns from sexy to scary, Ghostface starts asking Cotton about his favorite car killer movie. What's the John Carpenter classic about the car that kills a bunch of teenagers? Come on, it's not the most popular horror movie of all time, but it's definitely top shelf material. Cotton doesn't know the answer because he's not a horror fan, which is probably why he dies in the opening here. But it is pretty funny that he just keeps going through Stephen King movies except for the one that's the right answer. My man's got to do a rewatch on his John Carpenter and Stephen King movies, I'll tell you what. Something that's excluded from this opening scene is that we never cut to Christine, which makes the tension so much better. You are just trapped in this situation with Cotton Weary the entire time. I love that. I feel like this makes it way scarier. The driving sequence is extended a little bit because, you know, like I said, you kind of have this void where all of that, you know, Christine showering stuff is that's completely unnecessary, so that's no longer there. Cotton gets home, he races upstairs, the shower's going, and Christine is missing. What's going on here? He gets another call from Christine this time, saying that she's at Starbucks on the studio lot and says that some woman told her to meet Cotton there for some reason. Cotton urges her to call the police as Creed starts playing somehow from downstairs. I mean, I'm not complaining. What If is a killer song, probably my favorite from the Scream 3 soundtrack. But maybe 6 feet ain't too far down for old Cotton Weary. Let's get to that. Cotton goes downstairs, turns off the Creed, what the fuck? And then finds Christine dead in the closet. What? This blew me away. And mind you, I have seen Scream 3 probably like 20 times at this point. Ghostface runs in, gets some more fun, corny lines in there saying, "This is my show, Cotton." And then he's like, "But wait, I'm in the sequel." Gets stabbed right in the face. And cut to title card. Except there's no title card in the assembly cut. You're missing out on the coolest title card in the franchise. The whoosh, go through the whole 3, that's awesome. The opening scene from Scream 3 just doesn't build up the voice changer. It doesn't make it seem very scary. It's not trying to trick you. You know that it's somebody else's voice the whole time. But in this, it's kind of a huge twist in the opening scene. That's awesome. So instead of just getting these 15 seconds of shock a couple times throughout the opening and then just kind of forgetting about it as the movie starts to really get going, they build up the tension so you get this super suspenseful 15 minutes. I think I would like Scream 3 a little more if it started off this strong. That's kind of one of the reasons that it ranks so low for me, is that the opening just doesn't do anything for me. This would have sold me on the thing though, gimmick or not. Flashing forward a little bit into the movie, when we get to see Sydney's ghost mom, we get the dumb jump scare, but everything after this is so crucial and I don't understand why it was cut. This whole ghost mom should have been cut from the film, and we should have left the Neil Prescott stuff in there because this is so fantastic. We get this conversation with Sydney and her dad where they talk about losing her mom, and like, this is the scene that I needed from this. I don't want to see Sydney having a nightmare about her mom coming back to life or some bullshit and Ghostface jumps out of the window. It's the bathroom scene all over again. Like, we don't need that. It's just a dumb jump scare. Like, I would rather this sequence with her dad so that we get some emotional strength towards her character. I don't care that this is the third film in a franchise. I need to care for this character who's just been introduced. If I'm just watching this film for the first time, maybe I don't know about the events of Screams 1 and 2. Maybe I just know about Sidney Prescott existing only in the realm of Scream 3. And if I don't know anything from the past 2 movies, you need that reintroduction. It's so crucial to make this movie work. This is a little tiny change, but the Sarah Darling kill starts a little differently, and I kind of wanted to mention it. You get this shot right at the beginning that's super wide, and it's like from far away, it looks like Ghostface is stalking Sarah from afar, like off the studio lot. It's interesting, but I get why it was cut. There's only one Ghostface killer this time around, so it'd be kind of weird if Roman was like all the way over there somehow and then just like kind of ran in with his Ghostface robe on into the closet with all the other Ghostface robes. Like, why would he do that? Why would that be his plan? I get why it was cut, but it's a fun little shot. I think it's cool. Flashing forward again to that scene at Jennifer's house where Dewey and Gale show up, this is pretty much exactly the same except for the way it ends, when Dewey reveals to Gale that she gets killed in Stab 3, but it's a fake death and she's actually the killer in the film. Now, obviously it was a good decision for this to be cut considering the ending of Scream 3, but something else that I find interesting about this is later on in another scene that kind of feels extended, it gets revealed that Dewey kind of had a hand in writing Stab 3, and I think that's really interesting. It's very telling for how these characters feel about each other. Maybe he was the one to suggest that Gale should be the killer in Stab 3. It's like, ooh, what you trying to say, old dewdrop? Got some shit you gotta hash out with old Gale Weathers, I see. This is a little too predictive of what actually happens at the end of the film, so I'm glad it was ultimately cut. Flash forward to Sydney's house again when she gets that call on the phone, you know, when she's pretending to be Laura. The Ghostface dialogue is a little different here. It's a bit more horror movie oriented, which I really like. There's references to Hannibal Lecter and the Terminator, which are kind of cool, because that kind of builds up Ghostface a little more as being this genius mastermind. You know, the same genius mastermind who thought it would be a great idea to fill up a house with gas and somehow have our characters light up a lighter and blow it up. The best part of this scene though is Ghostface drops the hardest bar of the 2000s when he says that the killer is a dark reflection of the hero. This is a killer line because it's tight, but it also builds up Angelina as an even better red herring than she already is. It's making you think, oh, dark reflection of the main character. Oh, it must be the girl that's playing Sidney Prescott in the movie. Once again, I don't understand why any of these things were cut. This works so well. If this in the opening scene had stayed in, I would have believed all day, every day that Angelina was the main killer here, and then she ends up dying. The next scene at the police precinct is pretty much the same, but you get some new dialogue from Sidney Prescott that I wanted to put a magnifying glass on for a second here. Sidney says to Gale, oh, I hope you don't break Dewey's heart again. And like, although it's really funny, it's completely out of character for Sidney Prescott in Scream 3. Sidney's a little too nice, even though yes, she did punch Gale in the face at one point, but their relationship is just completely different at this point in time. I just don't think she would say that to Gale upon first meeting her again. The next scene after that also has a bunch of big differences I want to point out. Mark Kincaid, for instance, is getting bullied by his partner for having a little crush on Sidney Prescott. Ooh, I'm really glad that this and a lot of the other romance and sweet moments between between characters was cut. It just doesn't fit here. The Martha Meeks Randy tape thing is also totally different. Jamie Kennedy gets a bunch of interesting licks in there. I feel like they gave him a loose script of things to say and he kind of just riffed the rest of it, and you kind of see that a little more in this cut of the film. The only addition that I don't like that I'm glad was cut was there's a reference to the Phantom Menace from Jamie Kennedy's character, and mind you, he recorded that in 1998, a year before that film even came out. Once again, I imagine this was Jamie Kennedy just riffing. He was probably just thinking about movie stuff on his mind, and in 1999, Phantom Menace was on everybody's mind. It was the return to Star Wars. Of course he's gonna reference that, but it just doesn't make sense timeline-wise. Right after the sequence with Jennifer Jolie, Carrie Fisher, Gale, they're all in the archives room or whatever, we get this brand new scene with Ghostface where they download the voice of Sidney Prescott onto the voice changer. Yet another scene that makes the voice changer so cool, but they decided to cut it from the movie. It probably shouldn't have been put right there where it is, but maybe right before the Sarah Darling kill? Just to see Ghostface gearing up to go get another kill is kind of fun, and also sets up that once again, this killer is trying to imitate Sidney Prescott, which would make Angelina an even better red herring. It's almost frustrating that they cut this. All the way to the end of the second act, right before we go to Roman's house for the first time, we get this sequence in the car with Jennifer Jolie, Dewey, and Gale where they're all just kind of bitching about shit. There's three big things that happen in this scene. You get a nice moment with Jennifer Jolie being kind of silly and criticizing both Gale and Dewey for the way that they go about doing things. Gale and Dewey basically eat each other's butts out and start saying all these nice compliments to each other because they love each other now. And lastly, they get a call from Sydney saying come to Roman's house later tonight, so that's why they end up going there. I'm glad that this scene was cut. It adds nothing to the plot, and I think the original Scream 3 just handled this situation a little better. So now we're gonna skip all the way to the end of the film when Roman is already unmasked and he starts killing Milton. This is a little different. Roman kills Milton basically in the same way that he does in actual Scream 3, slitting his throat, but then he explains that Roman Bridger is a public figure that people already know. They'd expect Rena, or Maureen Prescott's son, to be 27. Roman Bridger is known in the public eye as 36. This addition to the monologue makes me like Roman a lot more. It shows off his smarts, but the movie just doesn't reflect that as a character for him. Once again, the house explosion thing. It's just too far-fetched. That's ridiculous. Why would you do that if you were a genius Ghostface manipulator? I just can't buy that movie. I'm sorry. The assembly cut makes me like the voice changer now because they actually set it up properly, but like the house thing, I just can't get over. If that wasn't in the movie, I could totally buy Roman as this killer Ghostface, who's this genius mastermind that kind of overpowers and trumps everybody else from the past. The goofy tone and Scooby-Doo antics, though, just really conflict with that, and I wish they had made this movie way darker than it was. The rest of the third act, though, is just simply a little weaker than how we know it today. There's that boiling point moment in actual Scream 3 where basically Roman and Sidney are about to tear each other's faces off, and it's great, but we're robbed of that in this scene. There's no Sidney fuck you here. There's just not as much emotion from the character. I've always loved that moment because then they just start breaking out and fighting each other, and it's awesome. But it's just not as epic in the way that they edited the scene here. First of all, they cut out Sidney's second fuck you, which just isn't as fun in my opinion. Come on, Sidney's got to get that in there. But then they also cut the bit about her having a bulletproof vest. So you're telling me they keep the dumb two guns thing in there from earlier, but they don't show you the main character surviving a bullet to the chest because she secretly had a bulletproof vest? That's cool. The two guns thing sucks. You're telling me that Sidney Prescott somehow predicted that she would need two guns on her ankles because Ghostface was gonna wand her like at being at the airport, but she didn't think to wear a bulletproof vest. Sidney would bring a gun and a bulletproof vest. That makes sense to me. I can buy into that. But two guns on both ankles? What is she, the Terminator? This assembly cut makes me really appreciate actual Scream 3's ending, though. Just a little more. It's much more action-packed than I give it credit for. Roman's death pretty much plays out the same, except Dewey references Randy's tape from earlier about the killer being indestructible, which I think is kind of cool, and then you also get to see Roman literally being indestructible, taking like 100 bullets, until he's finally shot in the head, because, you know, bulletproof vest. We hard cut to the ending of the film, which is all glorious and triumphant, and there's one big change here that I just think is really funny and I had to point out. It serves nothing significant to the overall plot, but they play the Dewey theme like so loud. Mind you, the sound mixing for this assembly cut is clearly not final. It's super rough. The decibels are like cranked at certain points, and at this point especially it is. It almost feels like a meme hearing Dewey's theme like so crunchy and awful. Overall, I'm glad that some things were changed, but oh my god, that opening scene is way better. If you took nothing else from this this assembly cut, take that opening scene and put it in Scream 3. It makes the movie a million times better. With all of my criticisms though, I still love Scream 3. It might be my least favorite in the franchise, but it's still a damn good time and easily one of the most fun watches in the entire franchise. What do you guys think about Scream 3 and the newly released assembly cut? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this brand new video on Scream 3. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you like looking at this disgusting face. The link for that is in the description below, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.